An historic defensive performance brings Seattle its second Super Bowl as Sam Darnold casts his ghosts into the past forever. Plus, did one rookie star throw away his bright NFL career? We've got all the news here on the Grey Duck NFL Show. Hello and welcome everybody once again to the Grey Duck NFL Show, and congratulations to your Super Bowl champion, the Seattle Seahawks. Second time that they have been Super Bowl winners in their fifth Super Bowl appearance. They get some measure of revenge for their loss, their last second collapse of a loss against the New England Patriots 11 years prior. And for the second time in as many Super Bowls that have taken place at Levi's Stadium, it was a defensive battle that looked ugly, especially to the widest base of NFL fans. So let's talk about it. We're going to talk about the NFL game. We're going to talk about the Super Bowl game, and then we're going to continue into some deep dives of the breakdown of what the Seahawks did right, what the Patriots did wrong. And then once we finish breaking down and getting all the squeezed juice out of this big 29-13 Seattle Seahawks win, we'll talk about some news before heading out for our day. That's the plan for today's Grey Duck NFL Show. So let's get into the game. Again, 29-13 Seahawks win. The over-under was 45.5 points. That was the under. The Seahawks were favored, and were favored by 4.5 points. They cover. And start to finish, their defense dominated this game. And man, it was, for some, I think a little bit more difficult to watch. And for me, it has kind of shown, for myself, how much I have grown as an NFL fan over the last 10 years. Because I remember watching the Broncos-Panthers Super Bowl when I was 21 years old in Santa Clara. And I remember thinking that this is one of the worst Super Bowls that we've ever seen. And now it didn't help that it was riding in on the coattails of the 2014 Super Bowl. But it wasn't one of the worst Super Bowls. It was a great defensive performance, an all-time defensive performance by the Broncos defense, and by Von Miller in particular. Him and DeMarcus Ware made Cam Newton look really human. And I don't have access to like the all 22 of that Super Bowl, of Super Bowl 50, to go back and see, okay, what was it that this Broncos defense did well overall? But I'm sure that if I did, I could see kind of the pieces on the chessboard being moved in excellent ways. Because now, 10 years later, back at Santa Clara again, in a similar sort of vein, where the Super Bowl on the outside, again, to the widest base of NFL fans, doesn't look all that great. Doesn't feel like we got our money's worth or our time's worth, having invested this whole NFL season for that to be the culmination. But I think I now take the opposite side of that, where I can see throughout the game, where I have taught myself and been taught by dozens of content creators on YouTube, like Brett Coleman, like Ted Nguyen, Match Quarters, and Cody Alexander. I have been taught by all of those folks kind of some level of knowledge on scheme. And I'm not saying that I know everything about scheme to the level of those guys and coaching clinics, coaches who have studied it and dedicated their life to it, but I have gained a deeper knowledge of the game. And that made that game a lot more interesting for me. So I would certainly suggest taking this off season if you are a fan of the NFL and looking up YouTube videos to kind of get an idea on schemes, on what makes outside zone, what makes it effective, what the running back is supposed to do on it. Different blitzes, different coverages, the way teams disguise their coverages, because all of that was on display in last night's game. And it makes even the more quote-unquote boring games, defensive showdowns, it makes them very, very entertaining. So let's talk about this one, because it was defensive scheme mastery by the Seattle Seahawks in their 29-13 win once again over the New England Patriots. There were 49 dropbacks by Drake Maye. First of all, Seattle shut down the run game. There was nowhere to go, and New England tried a couple of different concepts, but none of them really worked all that much. There were no explosives in the run game. It was the 7th time this season that Seattle did not allow an explosive designed run to its opponent. That's an historic run defense. So that certainly helped, because once you can stop the run, it makes everything else a little bit more predictable. And it allows your pass rushers, of which Seattle has many, to only really need to pin their ears back and not have to kind of second guess whether a run is coming or not. So the dominance on defense, which, by the way, for the run defense, a lot of those stops were not being made on the defensive line level. A lot of the stops were coming from the second level. Nick Emanwari, Ernest Jones had a incredible game. And I don't really think there's anyone on the Seattle Seahawks defense that you can say didn't have an incredible game. But the defensive line was doing its job by clogging up lanes and kind of forcing Ramondre Stevenson or Trevion Henderson to go in one particular direction, and the second level, third level guys were coming in, knifing in, making tackles, hardly missing any tackles, in just good, sound, fundamental football. They were reading the correct gaps, they were going to their correct gaps, and the run fit looked as good as ever for Seattle. And that was despite not going in to base defense, I don't think at all in this game, but if they did, it was very, very limited. Now, Seattle did, when we want to look at the personnel groupings and their tendencies, they did break tendency a little bit in that they've typically gone mostly nickel, no matter what. 11 personnel, 12 personnel. And they did that again. They were a high nickel team in this game, but they went to more dime than they ever have this season. In fact, when New England went to an 11 personnel, and typically the personnel grouping that a defense will match with in those instances is a nickel, because it's 3 wide receivers, and now you've got 3 cornerbacks, 5 total defensive backs. That's what nickel means. Nickel's 5 cents. There are 5 defensive backs. Dime is what Seattle ran whenever New England went to their 11 personnel, more often than not. So they were bringing in even an extra defensive back so that they could really hold down these Patriots wide receivers, none of which who are big game breakers. Yes, Stephon Diggs is still very, very good, but he's not the elite player he was at the end of his time in Minnesota and for most of his Buffalo career. He's a reliable option, but he's not going to be as explosive as he once was. And so when you bring out 6 defensive backs, you can cover 5 players and even blitz a little bit with, if you're bringing 4 and you have 6 in the secondary that are all defensive backs, that leaves 1 guy that's a linebacker, and you can give him a number of different roles. You can give Ernest Jones a number of different roles. He can focus on underneath coverage. He can focus on blitzing. He can go man to man with one of the New England Patriots wide receivers. And you can kind of use him as a utility knife because now you've got so many guys back there that have experience covering the fastest receivers. And like that is their job in the NFL. That has been the thing that they've been taught the most is technique in pass coverage. So Seattle actually matched speed with speed, whereas we haven't seen Seattle match mass with mass. They've counteracted it with speed and just stayed in their own set. In this instance against the Patriots, they went speed with speed. So that if for whatever reason their four-man pressure never got home, it wouldn't matter because they had guys blanketed downfield with their 6 defensive backs in great communication and using their match coverage a lot of the times. They did spot drop. They rarely played man coverage after playing a good amount against the Rams. They went back down to more of a zone route. I think 15% of their snaps were man coverage. But they were able to get it done, and it didn't even matter because they got pressure with their 4-man front. They were never really in danger in this game on the defensive side of the football. Continued pressure with 4 men, and a lot of this at times was simulated. Like Devon Witherspoon had, I believe it was 6 total pass rushes in this game. 2 of them is where he was just one of 4, with the other 4 being blitzes, where he was the extra man. So they were bringing guys in from depth and making it look like maybe they had more guys coming, and they were dropping defensive linebackers out, and they were running these fire zones. And it kind of confused Drake Maye a little bit. And so he's under pressure. He doesn't know where to go with the football. Seattle's rotating a lot post-coverage. And Seattle recognizes that. And so they will prioritize filling the passing lane that blitzer had just vacated. Because traditionally, or blitzer or sim pressure, because traditionally quarterbacks are taught to go hot, which is if your wide receiver notices that their cornerback is blitzing or a blitz is coming from their side, you just kind of sit back, turn around, and make yourself open after like a 5-yard curl. For New England, or for Seattle, they just would put the closest pass defender, whether that be one of the guys dropping from the defensive line or linebackers or maybe a safety, they would put him immediately into that line and then take a bit longer to vacate or to fill the vacated spot by that player who had to leave his traditional marker. So like if the outside cornerback had to fill the curl zone on the inside, then the safety over, because that slot defender came in on a blitz, Drake Maye sees that and now has to take an extra beat because he sees that that's now covered, and he has to now find, okay, where did that guy come from? What zone did that guy come from? And you'd like, more often than not, to already, by the time he has made that second read and gone on to that second player and figured out, okay, that's where this guy came from, the hope is that that door has been closed because the safety was able to get back over the top. And that's what happened. The Seattle defense was so good at blitzing, filling the vacated blitz, and then disguising which player would fill that filler's vacated area, that Drake Maye had a lot of trouble pulling the trigger until late in this game, and then by that point, he became too trigger happy and was throwing interceptions. And that was just when they were rushing pressure with rushing 4, and they were getting pressure, a ton of pressure. Let's just look at it right here. Leonard Williams was doubled a ton, so that allowed a lot of one-on-one opportunities for Byron Murphy, where he can just kind of explode through the gap in these instances when only 4 guys were rushing. And Byron Murphy had a 14.8% defensive tackle or pressure rate, which is high for a defensive tackle. And by and large, it wasn't just Byron Murphy, but when you look at the 4 main interior defensive linemen that rotate in and rotate out throughout the course of the game. Like, yes, Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams get the lion's share, but you're also getting some Jared and Reed and Riley Mills. And when you add up on the 42 non-pressured or non-blitzed dropbacks that New England went up against, Seattle was able to create pressure on 9 of those, a respectable amount, about 20%, when you are not, or 20% from the interior alone. That's not from everywhere. That's from the interior defensive linemen alone. They accounted for 20% pressures against Drake Maye when Seattle was not blitzing. So that's good. That is really good. Usually, like, your top defensive linemen and as a whole on the interior, the really good ones will be at like 15 to 17% throughout the course of a season, and this defensive line unit was able to get up to 20% without blitzing. And Riley Mills, the Notre Dame guy, their rookie, even got a sack, and his arms, man, are monstrous. I'm not just talking about the strength, but his arms look like they hang all the way down to the turf, like a knuckle dragger in the most complimentary sense possible, because he has no other choice but to drag his knuckles, or else he looks like he's delivering water buckets with his shoulders all the way up. It looks like he could walk on those hands if he wanted to. And he just pushes Garrett Bradbury on one of these plays, a non-blitz, into the back or front foot of Drake Maye, who had no chance of escaping because the pocket just collapsed. And Riley Mills only got 5 pass rush snaps in this game, but he made the most of them and got 2 pressures. So good game from Riley Mills. Good game from everyone along the defensive line, and then exceptional games from your edge linebackers. We talked about the 4 guys that rotate in and out on the interior defensive line. The 4 guys that rotate out on the edge are DeMarcus Lawrence, Boye Mafe, Uchenna Nwosu, and Derek Hall. And on the 42 non-blitz dropbacks that those players were in on, they generated 22 pressures. Over 50%, and that is on non-blitzed pass rushes. They were dominating the defensive or the offensive line of New England all day long. And like, you just look at some of these pressure rates that I'm going to pull up here. You've got Ernest Jones was constantly getting in there. He was a force against both the run and the pass. Devin Witherspoon, again, those 6 pass rushes provided crucial pressure each and every time. I think 5 of the 6 he got a pressure on, forcing Drake Maye to make an early decision. And a big reason for that was because Will Campbell was god-awful. Just terrible. And I remember watching draft film heading into the 2025 draft and seeing that this is a guy that is being overpowered a lot by other edge rushers that we are currently projecting to go in the 3rd or 4th round. Why is that the case? And then here, it all came to a head. And I liked Will Campbell with a move inside to guard because of his size, but he never seemed to play with the correct shoulder level. He always played from this awkward stance standing up, and that got fixed a little bit in New England, where he became a little bit more balanced. But in this instance, it reverted all back to when he was at his worst at LSU. And in this game, he gave up 14 pressures on 49 total dropbacks. 14 total pressures. We were talking about how Anthony Bradford having 8 pressures against the Los Angeles Rams, or giving up 8 pressures, was horrifying. This takes that to a whole new level. I was one of the people that thought it was a mistake to draft Will Campbell at number 4 overall because it seemed like you were drafting a guard. There were rumors that the Patriots had been interested in Armand Membou, who went a couple picks later to the New York Jets. I think that would have been the right call. I think Kelvin Banks I also had higher than Will Campbell. But the Patriots went with Will Campbell and kept him at tackle. You got to kick him inside to guard. There's no reason for him to be Drake Maye's blindside protector next year. He will be phenomenal at guard when he can get some help against some of those overbearing pass rushers, when he can squeeze them inside to the center. You need to get him out of that left tackle spot because of what happened tonight, and it led to the near massacre of the second-year quarterback, Drake Maye. Will Campbell said that he would die for his quarterback, Drake Maye, and we pretty much saw him die on the field tonight with all of the pressure that he was giving up, and also killing his quarterback that he would die for to try and protect. So just a really bad game, and I don't think it can be overstated how bad Will Campbell was. They needed to bring him help almost every play in the second half because he was getting beat so bad. And then the Seahawks would just counter with, okay, if we're blitzing, we're going to bring a lot of guys from that side. If we're not blitzing, we're going to bring most of our pressure from that side so that the help that Will Campbell is supposed to get is actually now occupied. The tight end, Chipper, or the running back now is occupied, and we've got 3 guys going through these 2 gaps, and you can't really give Will Campbell all that much help. And you're going to put him in a one-on-one situation again so that he doesn't get a teammate double-teaming pass rushers with him, and now he's getting walked back into the quarterback. So you're giving that help, and that means you're deleting one of your 5 eligible receivers for those plays that they are in helping. And it's not working anyway. It's just the pressure getting to you time and time again because Will Campbell was such a weak link on that Patriots offensive line. And also, a lot of credit goes to the edge rushers. DeMarcus Lawrence has long been one of the most underrated pass rushers in the NFL. And he had a big game. Boye Mafe, also underrated. Derek Hall. All of these guys are excellent players that if they were maybe on a different team as the primary edge rusher, they'd be getting a lot more noise year in, year out for Pro Bowl. But DeMarcus Lawrence always had Micah Parsons with him. And now he has this island of really good edge rushers. Doesn't quite roll off the tongue as the island of misfit toys, but an island of exceptional pass rushers that no one really overshadows the other, but you kind of just group them all together because of how good they all are. Seattle did good on the non-blitz pressures. Seattle did even better blitzing the ball. If we want to look at the EPA per dropback, New England actually, when they did not blitz, were better defensively than Seattle was when they did not blitz. When Seattle blitzed, only 7 times. That created minus 14 points total of expected points added. The Patriots on 7 plays lost 14 expected points. -2 per dropback. And the blitzes were phenomenal. I wanted to go through them. I wrote them all down. I charted each one of them because it was masterful. And this is why this game, I think, should not be hated this game should not be one that we go back and think that was a very, very boring Super Bowl, because we saw this chessboard open up. And we saw what Mike Macdonald had in store, and it was brilliant. First pressure, first blitz. They go cover zero with a plug, 2 plugs. And plugs are when you have some of the guys. Cover zero is when everybody is in man coverage against a receiver. No deep safety. When you have pluggers, that means whoever the plugs are, 1 guy, maybe 2 guys, whoever they are, do not blitz. So you're typically in most of your cover zero, when you think of it, it is man coverage everywhere. So 5 guys in man, everybody else is blitzing the quarterback. With cover zero plug, it's man coverage everywhere. Everyone except 1, or in this case 2, are blitzing the quarterback. And those 2 that are not blitzing the quarterback are your pluggers. They drop back and cover any quick underneath zones, so that, like in this instance, there are 2 deep safeties for Seattle that are covering receivers at the line of scrimmage. Drake Maye could just go hot and get it out to them right away, and the safeties wouldn't be able to get there in time. Maybe they could make a tackle and prevent a first down, but they wouldn't be able to get there on time. The pluggers drop back and prevent those early portions of the route to be exploited. They prevent any hot routes from the quarterback, or at least make them more difficult. And that gives the safeties that are back deep, attached to man-on-man coverage with wide receivers on the line of scrimmage, it gives them time to get into a good position once those hot routes have been taken up and the pressure's coming fast. So that's what they do. They put in a guy right over the nose. It's a linebacker, and it's Ernest Jones. They put 2 edge rushers outside of each of the tackles. And then they have their 2 defensive linemen, one playing inside shade to the center, the other playing in the 3 technique. That's Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams. They're going to drop Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams out. And they are going to be the pluggers here. They're going to try to prevent those early, quick, hot route throws. It's not going to be Ernest Jones, which is what you typically expect. If anyone's going to drop, it's going to be a linebacker. So with Murphy and with Williams over the guards, those guards are ready to go one-on-one with them. With 5 guys at the line of scrimmage, it looks like the Patriots are going to be in a 5-0 protection. 5-0 just means man protection. You get him, you get him, you get him. A lot of teams will slide, but here they go 5-0. And so these guards have nothing to do when Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy drop back. They were waiting for them, and they didn't drop back immediately. They took a couple of steps in to fake the blitz and then drop back. But now the guards have nowhere to go, so now it's basically your center and your 2 tackles against the rest of the blitzers, because the guards are not going to be able to get over to help too much on the outside based on what else was happening. Now they blitz on the outside, and they disguised this perfectly. Like, part of it is scheme, part of it is just the execution and the ability to not show your hand. Because they had both Nick Emanwari and Devon Witherspoon blitzing on this play from opposite sides. And New England put a receiver that Emanwari was on in motion all the way over to the opposite side of the field, and Seattle passed it off as if they were going to go into some sort of zone, where Emanwari said, okay, I'm not following him over here. I'll handle, this zone or whatever, and passed him off to Witherspoon, and Witherspoon said, yep, okay, perfect, got this guy. But about a second before the snap, after Drake Maye has finished his pre-snap read, that's when both of these guys start running towards the line of scrimmage, and they both get outside leverage and force an incompletion. You have one of the edge rushers occupying Will Campbell or occupying Morgan Moses, depending on the side, and you only have one running back in the backfield for protection. He picks up Emanwari. He is not able to pick up Witherspoon, and Witherspoon forces an incompletion. So how do they evolve off of that? They go into a cover 2 on their next blitz. And this time are still rushing 5, but they are rushing 4 from one side of the center, and that's Will Campbell's side. And this is one of the instances where it seemed like the Patriots might be giving him extra help because they put the running back over on that side. Seattle gives a cover 3 or cover 1 look. They give a 1 high look. They actually drop their safety that was playing in the box back to cover 2. Cornerbacks play in the flats after getting a jam on the wide receivers at the line. And then you have one guy rushing against Morgan Moses on the right side. And he's just there to occupy that side of the line. You have the middle linebacker dropping back. You have another edge rusher dropping back. You have the defensive tackle that is over the nose or inside to the left shoulder of the center. The nose tackle is on the left side, on the left shoulder of the center, and he crosses the face to rush in that other gap because now he's bringing the center with him. The center is turning with him as that defensive player crosses his face so that he doesn't give up the gap to his right shoulder. And now that opens the door for these 3 other players, 2 of whom are blitzing, to rush in against 2 guys and a running back. And in this case, Drake Maye is able to get the ball out. But because it was against a cover 2, it's a minus 2-yard loss. It's a 2-yard loss. They throw it in the flat to the running back or maybe a wide receiver who had leaked out that way, and the cornerback, Josh Jobe, makes an excellent tackle. So now you're on these 2 plays alone. You have an incompletion and a minus 2-yard pass. You are 1 for 2 for negative 2 yards. This next one, they are going to get a sack, and they are going to play cover 1. So that means the cornerbacks on the outside are going to cover the outside wide receivers, and they're actually going to leave a couple of players potentially open because 2 of the defenders that they bring, they have a total of 5 defenders in this play. One safety is going to play deep over the top. The other safety is going to rotate down and take away or try to take away one of these underneath intermediate zones, while one of the edge rushers one of the linebackers is going to drop back and take the intermediate middle zone on the other side. So the idea is, okay, your cornerbacks are locking up the outside receivers so that the outside hopefully is taken away and any quick inside throw is taken away because you've got these guys there against the slot receivers, not manning up, but playing in the zones that would be most exploitable against this pressure. And it's another one where Devon Witherspoon does not show his hand on his blitz. He's lined up over the slot wide receiver on one side of the field, the right side of the field, and it looks like he's covering him. He does not give any indication except the split second before the ball is snapped. And it looks like, and he's playing about 7 yards deep, so it's not like he's creeping up to the line of scrimmage and pretending to press him. He is giving no indication that he is blitzing at all. There is no reason for Drake Maye to think that pressure is coming from that player. And so now on the right side of the offensive line, Morgan Moses is going to take in this wide 9 rusher. Wide 9 means that he is not only outside of the tackle, but he's outside of where the tight end would be if he was involved in the formation. He is very, very wide out on his pass rush. So that's going to force the tackle that has him to get out really, really wide. And that hole next to him is going to open. And in order to occupy the guard so that he cannot help out with Devon Witherspoon, who's going to try to exploit that gap, they bring the 5 technique edge rusher. There are basically 2 edge rushers here, but they're bringing the 5 technique and they're going to loop him over to the center so that when it snaps, the left guard is going to be looking for an incoming stunt coming from the defensive tackle, who does kind of bring it to him. But now that guard is, along with the center, double teaming this nose defensive tackle that's just coming straight up the field. Meanwhile, you've got a looper to try and open up even more space for Devon Witherspoon to come through. That looper is able to do his job, get open so that the guard doesn't keep his head to the outside, but now is keeping his head to the inside and doesn't really see Devon Witherspoon just racing through, and he gets to the quarterback and gets the sack. -10. So you're at negative 12 yards on 3 blitzes. Another one, we've got an incompletion, and this one was more just kind of a standard blitz. You're playing cover 3 with the cornerbacks going deep. They had 3 safeties in here, and they bring the middle safety who was playing up deep. So they do kind of rotate out of this too high look, and then they bring your typical deep safeties, the too high. They brought them down into the underneath zones and took away everything, and then kind of simply with 6 guys against 5 offensive linemen just attacked each and every gap. And it was a pretty standard, but they were able to get there. It gave, all you needed was a one-on-one to win. One-on-one did win, and it forced Drake Maye to get the ball out quickly again and an incomplete pass. The next blitz, they give up 13 yards. They go back to the cover 3 again, but this time they drop rush 5. So there's 3 underneath zone defenders and 3 over the top. And really they're just blitzing one guy from depth. Again, trying to open up a gap between the tackle and guard on the right side of the offensive line, where they bring in the edge rusher to rush deep outside so that Morgan Moses opens his hips, goes way upfield, is brought upfield, and then also bringing the tackle that is over the guard, again crossing the face of that guard and attacking the center so that for a second the guard looks back towards, sees him, is carried over with him because it is his responsibility to block this player until he leaves his zone. He's crossed his face, but by the time he's able to get back and look to the right side, the oncoming rusher already has speed and leverage and can easily get right past him, unless he's in perfect position, which he really just can't be. But Drake Maye there is able to get a 13-yard pass to Ramondre Stevenson. Because they weren't playing cover 2 this time, they were playing cover 3. The flat was open. So Seattle responds to that on their next blitz by going into a cover 2 so that the flats won't be open. And it is going to be a 7-yard pass here. And they go with 2 defensive tackles, both over the center. One in one A gap, the other in the other A gap. The linebacker behind one of those defensive tackles is going to rush the B gap on the right side. The defensive end on the right side is going to rush to the outside and try to pull the tackle again off the line of scrimmage pretty deep to open up another, again, hole between Morgan Moses and Mike Onwenu. And that hole is going to be attacked by 2 different players. A linebacker that Onwenu is going to pick up, and then a cornerback that is going to have, again, that hole free. So they are overloading one side on all of these blitzes, but disguising it so that you can't tell, because they have 4 men even across this defensive front. They have on each side an edge rusher just outside of the offensive tackle, and then a defensive tackle in the A gap on that side. And it mirrors itself. The linebackers are mirroring each other. It is not this unbalanced defensive look, but what they're doing is they're going to drop the edge rusher on the left side out, and then one of the guys in the A gap is going to go right at the center. Another guy in the A gap is going to essentially work as that 5 technique edge rusher. He's going to loop all the way around and try to attack Will Campbell as if he was rushing from the spot where that edge rusher previously was. But he's doing it from the start as a defensive tackle position. You have to be athletic to do that quickly. Byron Murphy is able to, and that pulls the left tackle all over to that side, and doesn't really give Drake Maye any room to run because a guard and tackle are colliding into each other and not opening up any gap on that side. He's able to get a 7-yard pass, and then the last blitz of the day, the final one, is the one where it was an interception returned for a touchdown by Nwosu. And Uchenna Nwosu comes away with the pick 6 after we have the same sort of concept. They're going to play palms coverage on the back end. They're going to have 6 guys deep, 3 guys kind of on each side. There's actually 4 guys on one side, but the inside defensive back on that left side is going to have a spot to play, a coverage zone to be in, or a person to read on the opposite side of the field, and has to get over there quickly. He does. And once again, Seattle goes edge rusher, take Morgan Moses deep into the backfield. Defensive tackle, occupy the guard by crossing his face. In fact, occupies the center. He's over the right guard, and he goes all the way to the left shoulder of the center, loops over. The defensive tackle that's in the 3 technique is going to try and go outside shoulder of Will Campbell, so he's going to cross his face. So that is bringing the offensive line naturally in this step to the left direction based on how the pass rush is flowing. And then once that happens, it creates this split on the right side where now Ernest Jones and Devon Witherspoon sprint through basically the same gap. Ernest Jones gets picked up by the running back. Devon Witherspoon runs free and forces what I thought was a fumble at the time, but I guess they ruled it an interception. Forced a batted pass into the air where Uchenna Nwosu gets it and takes it to the house and puts an end on this game. These are blitzes that are so exquisite and so well thought out, where at first is, okay, we're showing you early we're going to attack Garrett Bradbury with the blitz. And then later in the game, we're actually going to trick your whole offensive line. Now that the right side isn't expecting the blitz as much, we're going to bring a lot of pressure and overload from that side. It was so smart and worth watching the film over and worth writing down, because Mike McDonald is a maniac, and he's going to have this Seahawks team well built for the future with his scheme. So that is a long way to talk about that Seattle Seahawks defense, but I think we did it a good bit of justice. I think they were the most important part of this game, the biggest game breaker, played the biggest role, and were worth talking about for that long. We'll get to the offense real quick. Seattle's offense, Kenneth Walker, was the biggest impact player, especially in that first half. New England's defense was looking almost every bit as dominant, especially against the pass, as the Patriots was in that first half. They were blitzing more, but still getting pressure on Sam Darnold, forcing him to make inaccurate throws at times. And Kenneth Walker was really the only difference between the Seahawks offense and the Patriots offense, whereas the Patriots were not able to get any ground game going. The Seahawks getting the ground game going pretty much kept them in the lead the whole time. They didn't score any touchdowns. It was 9-0 at halftime, but Kenneth Walker was getting chunk runs, explosive runs, that would at least get Seattle into field goal range. And you needed those explosive runs because no team was really able to maintain long drives. You needed an explosive play. You weren't getting it from the passing game. So here's a 30-yard run from Kenneth Walker. Now you're set up, kick the field goal. And that led Seattle to getting out to a 9-0 lead. And he was named, rightfully so, the Super Bowl MVP because you can't really give it to a whole defensive unit. I think Devon Witherspoon was probably the best player on the field all game. But he doesn't, you got to look back at the stats 10 years from now, and if you see, he had 1 sack, what else did he do? The box score stats. Kenneth Walker is a more redeemable choice, I guess, by the NFL in that sense, with the 130-plus rushing yards. He got the job done on offense, and he allowed Seattle to get out to a lead, which forced New England to be mostly passing in the second half, which played right into the hands of the Seahawks defense. Darnold had some trouble early, and even on some of it was completions. He almost throws that interception to Marcus Jones, but it was threaded perfectly. He throws a couple of good balls, but he also threw some ones that were just out of the reach of his players. He's getting pressured, and he has Rashid Shaheed open, wide open deep, and he overshoots him. He has a player open at the goal line in the end zone, throws it a little bit too far inside, allows Christian Gonzalez to break it up. Where the ball placement is just a few inches off from where it needs to be. And the blitz, you can tell, is kind of getting to him. But he turns it around in the second half. And I think, even though his numbers are not eye-popping, I think he played about as well you'd expect a top 10 quarterback to play, given the circumstances of the Patriots creating pressure on like 50% of the dropbacks in the first half. He's not going to have a lot of opportunities to get the ball off cleanly. He's going to feel some like shell shock even when he is kept clean and have this internal clock racing and telling him he needs to get the football out even faster than he typically does, speeding up his own whole process, which is going to cause your body at times to make mistakes mechanically. But he was able to get it controlled in the second half against the blitz, whereas in the first half, Seattle was very, very bad offensively against New England's blitz. They took advantage of every time the Patriots blitzed the football. And in fact, the touchdown to A.J. Barner came on a blitz in which the coverage broke down around New England. Sam Darnold stood in. Again, made a throw that probably wasn't the most accurate because Barner had to kind of fingertip grab it and was almost brought out of bounds because of it, but he hit it. And I remember a very similar play against the Lions at the end of Week 18 where he didn't hit it, where he just threw it all the way away in that corner because of the pressure that the Lions had brought early. And against the blitz, in the second half, Sam Darnold and the Seahawks EPA per pass drop back was excellent. I believe it was at a 0.28, 0.29. I'll have to look back at the numbers to find out what the specific number was, but that is MVP level play. Like you're talking about the best quarterbacks each year throughout the season have a season-long average of a 0.25 EPA per dropback. And that was the case with Drake Maye this year. And Sam Darnold in the second half was above that because of the running game Kenneth Walker had set up in part, some of the adjustments as well that Clint Kubiak created, but also Sam Darnold settling down and taking what he was seeing whenever New England blitzed. And I think that's good for Sam Darnold, who we'll talk about what this means for his legacy in just a moment. Patriots offense, we've talked about how Seattle's defense made them look silly. Will Campbell in particular, but also Drake Maye had a really terrible game. He did have 2 dime throws where if he had been in that zone all game, then yeah, the Patriots probably win that regardless of the pressure because they were perfectly placed throws, perfect reads, but his reads were just so all over the place. The pressure had a deep effect on his accuracy where he's throwing bad balls to receivers that at times would get open against these limited coverages that Seattle runs. He had there were a couple of instances where you could see afterwards there was a guy streaking open. There's Stephon Diggs streaking open. And Drake Maye just doesn't pull the trigger. And I think Mike Tirico and Chris Collinsworth, who have that sort of look from the booth that you get with the All-22, I think they were seeing open guys especially in that second half, that Drake Maye was not hitting. And then he just throws a terrible interception where I don't even think it was the right idea, but maybe at least if you're making the right idea, or maybe at least even if it's the wrong idea, if it was somewhat of an accurate pass, it's probably not going to be intercepted. But he threw it about 15 yards behind where the receiver ended up being, and it was an easy interception. They were trying to get the deep crosser, like Collinsworth said, and you can't say it got open because as soon as the safety saw Darnold throwing, he ran to that area. He probably stays and has good coverage on the receiver. That's why I said I don't think it was a good throw or a good decision, but it was even worse of a throw that allowed the interception. Then he had like a Hail Mary attempt at one point in the fourth quarter that was almost intercepted, where he just throws the ball up into a sea of 3 Seahawks defenders and 1 Patriots receiver. His judgment was highly affected. His throws outside of 2 were off target all day long. And he cost his team a Super Bowl, or a chance at the Super Bowl. If he plays better, especially early on, it's more of a game throughout the second half, and at that point, more of a toss-up. But he just could not get it done, and he refused to use his legs. At times, he couldn't use his legs because of how wide the edge rushers were rushing and containing him. But he just stood in the pocket at times like a statue, and I think it's going to be the case whereas Sam Darnold, if we look at the All-22, once I look at the All-22, I think I'm going to be more impressed than his numbers say I should be, whereas I think I'm going to be even less impressed by Drake Maye's film than the numbers tell me. Because Chris Collinsworth and Mike Tirico, without saying it, were kind of hinting at it, like, oh, Drake Maye doesn't pull the trigger. And Chris Collins was saying that he was having just an awful time reading the football field particularly. And we can see a little bit of that during the broadcast, but we can see more of it on the wide-angle film, which I'm going to kind of take a look at to see how poorly Drake Maye truly, truly played. Patriots defense was their shining spot. They blitzed a ton, and again, paid for it in the second half, but that kept them in the game in the first half, which was, again, a credit to both Kubiak and Darnold making adjustments. And it looks like the Patriots have a legit defense moving forward that was kind of built up throughout the course of the season, was not great early on, and then we could say was propped up by an easy schedule throughout the second half when it started to look good. I think it was more the case of just getting to know this new system with an interim defensive coordinator that had never coached as a defensive coordinator at any level, that had never called plays defensively at any level, and was brought in to be a position coach for the first time in his NFL career before the defensive coordinator, who was the full-time defensive coordinator, Terrell Williams, got cancer, and it forced Zach Kerr to step up into the limelight. But it was shaky at first, not so shaky throughout the season, and then when they played their toughest opponents, it was not shaky at all. It looked good, and it looks like this is going to be a legitimate contender in the AFC East for some time, and I'm looking forward to the battles of Buffalo and New England in that AFC East, because I think we got a long dominant period in that division by the Patriots, a not as long but still decently long period of pure domination by the Bills, and now for like the next 5 years we're going to have them fighting it out. One of them in the wild card, one of them in as the division winner. And they're going to have 2 games against each other each season now that are going to be must-see TV, and maybe a third if they somehow meet in the playoffs as well. Christian Gonzalez, 3 pass breakups, all of them beautiful. One kind of because Sam Darnold made a bad throw, but the other 2, great. I think it was really fun to see these 2023 cornerbacks and Christian Gonzalez and Devon Witherspoon, who were ranked so closely together by draft analysts, to see them go one-on-one in the Super Bowl and both show out in the Super Bowl. And obviously they're not playing against each other when they're not on the field at the same time, I should say, but they both put together some of their best performances of their career doing what they've done with Witherspoon in a lot of the underneath zones with the bigger guys on the outside, and then creating pressure like Antoine Winfield Sr. and Christian Gonzalez just being a lockdown outside cornerback. Craig Woodson, the rookie Cal safety. If not for Devon Witherspoon, I would probably say was the best player on the field on either team in that game. Run stop after run stop after run stop. He's coming up from the third level of the defense, from the secondary, to make these plays. Anytime that Kenneth Walker was stuffed, it was because of Craig Woodson. It was targeted 3 times in the pass game, didn't give up a single completion. That is a promising performance by your rookie safety. And I think he got overshadowed a little bit because of Nicky Manwari being so good, and probably still better than Woodson, but I don't think Woodson is that far behind as that same archetype of player. He's the guy that made the pass breakup on 4th down in the game against the Broncos that got the Patriots the ball back and prevented the Broncos from going up 2 possessions. He's reading the field excellently. He's making plays. He's a sure tackler. New England got a guy with Craig Woodson, and if they can keep Jalen Hawkins before he hits free agency, then really that whole secondary of your starting 2 cornerbacks and your starting 2 safeties is going to be elite, with Carlton Davis, Christian Gonzalez at corner, and Hawkins and Woodson as your safeties. And then another good Super Bowl performance by Milton Williams, just on the wrong end of it this time. He had a sack, had some pressures. I think he pressured nearly at a 20% clip, but it was above his season average. He really took advantage of some of the weaker links on the middle of the Seahawks offensive line, but it was not enough. But I just wanted to make sure to shout out those players, because I think a lot of times big performances by the losing team, not always, but more often than not, can get forgotten about. And I just wanted it to be known for history and the 15 viewers on this stream, if that Craig Woodson, Christian Gonzalez, and Milton Williams all performed admirably despite their loss. So what is this Seahawks legacy as we go forward? What should we think about the future of the Seattle Seahawks team? I think it is extremely bright. I think the Sam Darnold narrative can be finally erased. And I think of sports kind of in 2 realms for me. There is the analytic parts of the game, the chess match of the game, but there's also the great storytelling that it does. A reality TV show that's not scripted. The best sort of reality TV show where if you understand the sport, you understand the characters of it. And I think a lot of people who don't like sports would be able to see the storytelling that it provides if they focused on that aspect of it. Because you have Sam Darnold, who against the Patriots, when he was with the Jets, where he was considered a complete and utter bust at this point, and became even more of a pariah after NFL Films mic'd up segment caught him saying, "I feel like I'm seeing ghosts out there," because he was being punished so badly by a top-tier New England Patriots defense. He was getting sacked, he was getting pressured, he was getting hit. Even when he wasn't feeling pressure, he was scattershot, trying to get rid of the football, because he felt the ghosts, felt that pressure was coming from somewhere, so he's vacating the pocket and now is in not a great position to make a throw, even with the pressure not there. And in Minnesota, he did a little bit to change the narrative around him. But then all of the Darnold haters, I guess, pointed to the last 2 games and said, see, that's always going to be the guy that he's going to be. And now for him to beat the Rams, one of the teams that made him look foolish in Minnesota, and to beat the Patriots in consecutive games, to win a Super Bowl, and solidify yourself, I think, as a top 10 quarterback in the league right now, to beat out other quarterbacks from your draft class and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson that have had better careers than you, but to beat them to your first Super Bowl title. That has to change this Darnold narrative. It has to change kind of the way we think about quarterbacks who have a rough first go of it. And makes me think that giving those guys a chance is worth it. Giving Malik Willis a chance is worth it. Giving Kyler Murray a chance. Giving Tua a chance in the offseason. Giving Mac Jones a chance. Giving Trey Lance a chance. Trey Lance, who never really got a chance. Although, I will say when we have seen him start, it hasn't been pretty. But first season, he's on the bench. Second season, he breaks his bone in week 2. And you only see 2 games from him. One of which was in the full game, which was in a rainstorm at Soldier Field in awful field conditions. Then Brock Purdy just takes the reins. It wasn't, and maybe the practice reports were different, but it wasn't as if Trey Lance just failed miserably. He played 2 games and then was relegated to be a bench player for the rest of his career. I will say that his performance against the Broncos, while with the Chargers in Week 18, did not inspire much confidence, but some of those guys, when given the second chance, and not all of them, but some of them have the chance to become the next Sam Darnold. And I think especially for some of the higher ceiling guys, Anthony Richardson, for example, it is worth it to take a shot on those players rather than going with the backup that you know. You can discover something great when you go into the rough, and it might end up leading you to a Super Bowl down the road. If Minnesota had stuck with him, who knows? Maybe they would have been the ones lifting the Lombardi. This was a historic defense for Seattle, but there's always a chance of that. And then the other question is, how does this team stack up to the 2013 team? And specifically, how does the dark side defense compare to the Legion of Boom? And I think the Legion of Boom, for me, I would say the Legion of Boom probably burned brightest. But I think the dark side will burn longer. I think that the Legion of Boom wasn't necessarily scheme-based, it was personnel-based. And in 2013, 2014, 2015, 2012, you had the elite personnel able to execute at a high level. Then Earl Thomas goes, Cam Chancellor goes, Richard Sherman goes. And it was the same system, Pete Carroll's same system, but much different results. To me, it was all about execution. And to me, I think the legacy of the dark side has the chance to be longer lasting because it is so scheme driven. A lot of guys, and it does obviously rely on good execution, but it feels more sustainable. It seems like you can plug in more guys into this dark side defense, into Mike McDonald's scheme, and let it work. And now I will say, caveat to that is, in coverage, you need to make sure your guys have good communication together, because these match coverage setups, these palms, these quarters that Seattle runs a lot of, they are in communication so well, passing receivers off to each other so easily, all coming to the same conclusion on their reads of their keys. And so you do need that talent to execute, or else you risk having more blown coverages. But I think, by and large, that this dark side defense can turn through players a little bit better than the Legion of Boom could. So I think the dark side defense has a chance of lasting even longer than the peak of the Legion of Boom, which was probably about 2.5 years. Like middle of 2012, actually probably beginning of 2012, so 3.5 years. And parts of 2015. For the Patriots, got to build that offensive line better. Move Will Campbell inside. Get another offensive tackle. Try to in the draft. Try to trade up for somebody that you like. Caden Proctor. Francis Mauanoa. Caleb Blomu. Spencer Fano. But get Will Campbell over to guard. I think that fixes your left guard position. Move Jared Wilson over to center if Garrett Bradbury's gone. Keep Morgan Moses around. Keep Mike Onwenu around on the right side. And things get a little bit better for you. I also have a lot of faith still in Drake Maye. I think the fact that he made those 2 excellent throws against that defense, made the best 2 throws of the night, is still encouraging, even though by and large the game was a failure. I'm still encouraged on what he can do, and if he can do that more consistently under pressure, then he becomes a lot more unstoppable. It's still about getting there, but I have faith in most normal games against most normal defenses that he still has that high ceiling, and now he needs to prove in this upcoming year that he can have that high ceiling even against the top defenses in the NFL, of which he won 3 games out of 4 of the top 10 by beating Denver, the Chargers, and Houston. Just came up short on Sunday against Seattle. And then keep building around that defense as well. Complement it with good parts. And I think that New England is going to have success as well for a decent amount of time, as long as Drake Maye is their quarterback. Final thoughts on the Super Bowl right there. Also wanted to say that the Bad Bunny halftime show was excellent in terms of production, especially for a television audience. I don't know how well it played at the actual venue when you can't really see because of the sugarcane field that is surrounding Bad Bunny. But for the television audience, of which that is most of the audience, excellent production value, camera work, everything, storytelling. I don't think we've seen, except maybe the weekends where he goes through the mirror maze, I don't think we've seen storytelling like that ever at the Super Bowl. I don't think we've seen many attempts to do storytelling through song like that at the Super Bowl. And I think that should be kind of what the NFL and Jay-Z and Rock Nation or whatever is looking for, is to have that storytelling along with the good music. And I don't speak Spanish, so I could not understand a word, but it was fun. It was lively. And it seemed to honor Puerto Rico and honor unity and call for unity in a time where everything is so divisive, to the fact you've got this shitty other one, alternate Super Bowl going on, purely because some people in America get so riled up about the fact that some people speak Spanish and some people aren't white and some people don't talk and look like a white European, that they decided to make their own little event, flooded it with a lot of bots, got almost no social media traction from it, and tried to call it a success, where even if it was all people, it peaked at 5.5 million viewers, whereas the Super Bowl was getting its typical 130, 150 million. Did not put a dent into the Super Bowl. And you got to watch Kid Rock lip sync and some nameless country artists sing pretty badly in like a convention center conference hall. That is what creates the division. Bad Bunny brought in the unity with his messages, that love is indeed the only thing more powerful than hate. And I think that halftime show and the numbers from it compared to the numbers of the halftime show that is more focused on the divisiveness and the hate, kind of prove that that is true. The halftime show, whose ideologies are born from a place of hate and a place that tries to drive people apart, didn't go well for him. But it did for the Bad Bunny Super Bowl show, halftime show. So maybe that is a little bit of some hope that we, as a country, can be like Sam Darnold, broken and become renewed. And I think that would be a great hope. Heading into the news, James Pierce Jr. throwing away his NFL career after getting 10.5 sacks in his rookie season. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what can possess you. This is not all of a fit of rage sort of thing, if you look at the details at least. So James Pierce had been dating a former WNBA player. They had broken up recently. And James Pierce, starting on Friday, began to text his ex-girlfriend, who had blocked his previous number, using a different phone. And she basically tells him to leave him alone. And the player was a former Los Angeles Sparks player, Rickea Jackson. And so he starts to drive, I guess, on Saturday morning, after he's had time to calm down. It's not like in a fit of rage sort of thing doesn't excuse the actions, but it makes you kind of understand that, oh, this isn't just some guy throwing his career away. He's just has severe anger problems. This was like a planned out sort of act that was just dumb. Like, he finds Rickea Jackson in a white Lamborghini SUV and starts trying to go after her in broad daylight. Tries to open her car door, then follows her after she locks her car door and leaves, and he continues to go after her. This is an emotion that was so heavy on a Friday that it stayed heavy until a Saturday morning, into the point where he was just making the dumbest decisions, and he's following her around and intentionally colliding into her vehicle, into the rear. And then he finds out that she was driving to the police station because she just wants to get away from this whole situation, and he cuts her off and goes head on into her. What are you thinking? And there is no report right now, anything in the papers or the court documents that said he was under intoxication. There's no charge related to intoxication as we're recording this. This is a sober-minded idiot with anger problems, making dumb decisions and ruining his NFL career. He's not going to play in the NFL again. Because not only does he hit her, then he goes and hits a police officer who calls it in. They go after him, and then it takes 7 people to arrest him. He's trying to resist arrest and is unable to do so. How dumb are you? I don't understand. I cannot fathom the idiocy that it takes to do what James Pierce Jr. did. And now it makes the Falcons trade up for him look even worse. They're out without a first-round pick. That was where essentially their first-round pick for this year went to, was James Pierce Jr., who had one good season in the NFL and is probably not going to play at least for a while, and definitely not for the Atlanta Falcons again. So good jobs, James Pierce. Incredible, if all of this turns out to be true, that you threw your career. And it's hard to believe that it wasn't true, since it all happened in broad daylight. It all happened in view of the public. Hard to believe that didn't happen. So I'm saying allegedly just for, legal purposes. Like, throw your career away, man. You had a chance to make a lot of money. You had a chance to, be a hero in Atlanta, and you throw it away because you can't handle rejection. And can't handle rejection to the point where you make dumb decisions because of it. Meanwhile, quarterback carousel starting to get oiled up. Derek Carr is thinking about coming back if it is the right fit. I don't know any teams that have the right fit that would want Derek Carr to be their quarterback at this point after a year out of retirement, but he's making news for himself, so good for him. Likely out, as reported this weekend, Kirk Cousins in Atlanta, Tua Tagovailoa in Miami, Kyler Murray in Arizona. I don't think those were necessarily a surprise, but all of those places did have new head coaches, so there was a chance that maybe one or some of those new head coaches would want to keep around those guys. It seems like none of them do. And apparently Aaron Rodgers and his relationship with Mike McCarthy is better than it was when it ended in Green Bay, and there is a chance now, a good chance, that Rodgers comes back to the Steelers in 2027. We'll see if, or 2026. We'll see if that does hold throughout the course of this offseason, but those are some quarterback names that if your team is needy for a quarterback and you don't have the ability to pick Fernando Mendoza or even Ty Simpson, those would be some of the names that are going to be out there on the market and where their likelihood of landing spots currently stands. Then the Bears have Press Taylor as their new offensive coordinator. He is an in-house promotion after Declan Doyle took the job with the Baltimore Ravens to run the Lamar Jackson offense and hopefully run it pretty well, and we'll see what he can do. But Press Taylor had been the offensive coordinator for Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson with the Jacksonville Jaguars, had some good seasons. I think kind of left on a sour note with Doug Peterson. He was doing more play calling then. He's not going to do a ton of the play calling now. He's more going to just help coordinate the offense without, the play calls. He's going to help practices and all that. I don't really know exactly what non-play calling offensive coordinators do, but he won't have to call the plays, and so he will not be he won't be much maligned for that within the city of Chicago. It's kind of just like a title head, a figurehead for him to say that he has been an offensive coordinator once again. And we'll see how that all works out, if there are much differences between the Bears offense this year and the Bears offense next year. Well, that's all we got for you here on the Grey Duck NFL show. It has been a fun Super Bowl breakdown. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that I brought some light. And we're going to head into the NFL offseason, probably stick to a 2-show-a-week, 1-show-a-week schedule. Maybe take later on in this week off as we digest what just happened, and I'll come back and maybe even give some more thorough thoughts on the Super Bowl in our next episode, but we'll also dive into what teams need to do in the offseason. It's the Grey Duck NFL show. Thanks for joining us.